Joining us now, author and historian Niall Ferguson. He's out with the new book, The Square and the Tower, Networks and Power, from the Freemasons to Facebook. Niall, good morning. Good to see you.
Good to be here.
We'll talk about the book in just a moment. I want to get to a piece you wrote in the Boston Globe in which you write a recurrent theme of the 1993 book, The Agenda, is Bill Clinton's explosively bad temper. His press spokesman, George Stephanopoulos, told Bob Woodward that he had seen and experienced Clinton's temper tantrums many times. Others called them purple fits or earthquakes. My point is not that Clinton is like Trump, of course. My point is that the presidency will infuriate even the best of men. Yet each presidential biographer makes the mistake of presenting irascibility as a significant character trait of his subject rather than appreciating that it is structural. The job is inherently maddening. I cannot guarantee that Trump's fate will be identical to Clinton's, but what makes you so sure it won't be the same old Shakespearean drama, just with a different cast? Flesh that out a little, if you would, because some people would read that as saying, well, look, this is normal. This is part of the presidency. But would you agree that Donald Trump is something new and different?
Well, he personally is clearly different from other presidents, and also on policy issues he's differed radically, and you've all talked about this endlessly. But part of the point of writing a book about networks is to say sometimes what really matters is the structure of power. And if you look at the network that forms around any president, it has the quality of a court in the time of Shakespeare. Steve Bannon's comment to Michael Wolff that this is Shakespearean is right. The White House is a royal court. And it doesn't matter so much what the personality of the president is. Certain things will always happen. Number one, the people who were great in the campaign will turn out to be not so great in government. And so in both Clinton and Trump's cases, there was a big shift of personalities in year one. The other thing that always happens is that the new team finds it's difficult to deal with Congress, which is where the sausage gets made. And so both Trump and Clinton failed on healthcare reform, but they did succeed on fiscal reform. Much of Clinton's energies ended up going into raising taxes. Much of Trump's administration's efforts went into cutting them. And so structurally, they're not that different. So you can of course say all you like, and we all talk endlessly about Trump's personality, but I think we shouldn't lose sight of the structural similarities, because that often is what determine the outcome. Let's remember the outcome of the Clinton presidency was defeat in the midterms. That's quite probably coming Trump's way this year. But then re-election, survival, impeachment. But again, it didn't destroy him. So one key point I would make is that structurally, this presidency is more like Clinton's so far than like Nixon's.
Structurally different, but can not that personality that we've been talking about in Donald Trump begin to change the structure of the presidency in terms of changing norms that have been in place for so long?
Well, yeah, that was predicted. I mean, if you remember a year ago, a great many people, Tim Snyder at Yale, for example, was saying, we're on the brink of tyranny. There's going to be a fundamental change in the nature of the presidency because this man's so awful. But, you know, it hasn't really happened. In truth, there hasn't been any big shift in the way that the system of government works. The Constitution hasn't changed. The people who predicted tyranny, I think, have egg on their faces. This is not It Can't Happen Here by Sinclair Lewis. This isn't The Plot Against America by Philip Roth. It's actually a rather familiar drama in which the personality of the president dominates news coverage, and just as it did in Clinton's case. Remember sex scandals? Also a feature of Trump's story increasingly. But I don't think from a historian's point of view, these are the things that really matter in terms of outcomes. And what we're interested in, I think, as historians, are the big changes in policy. And I, at this point, don't see a dramatic discontinuity in American history. I've said all along that we can be as interested as we like in personalities, but it's the structure of politics that determines the outcome.
So you think it's more noise than signal at this point, the tweets and the rhetoric?
Absolutely. The biggest problem, and it's partly a consequence of social media for you guys in covering this story, is there is just such a huge amount of noise that the signal's almost undetectable. And my job as a historian is to say, let's listen out for the signal and see if there really is historic change happening here. I don't think that there really is.
The only thing is, unlike sex scandals of the past in White Houses, I don't watch a lot of TV, but I don't see us covering this porn star. I mean, I can't believe, by the way, that this is totally not even news at this point because there's so much going on. But I don't see a huge interest in that. I think what I see on a lot of news shows is the concern about the impact on history. And the violation of norms.
The point that I'm making in the piece is not that Trump is personally like Clinton.
Right.
I mean, it's clear, I've said this all along, from the moment he announced he was running for president, there's a racist quality to Trump's rhetoric.
Right. That's
clearly
incredible.
quite different from Bill Clinton, whose best buddy was Vernon Jordan in those days. So the personalities are different, but we've got to remember that what really determines outcomes is not just the personality of the president. This isn't a monarchy, it's a constitution. The Constitution was designed to separate powers. What happens in Congress is less exciting generally, but it is constitutionally as important, and in some ways more important, than what happens in the White House.
So you write in your book that the presence of networks through history is an important understanding of power. Here today, of course, we have social networks, the biggest networks of all. How has that changed how Trump's White House is different from the Shakespearean court?
Well, it's changed it in a lot of ways. For one thing, he would not be president if Facebook and Twitter hadn't existed. I'm pretty clear that the story of 2016 wasn't that the Russians meddled in the election. They did. But what really mattered was that social media had created a completely new public sphere, and the Trump campaign understood how to use that. They understood how to use Facebook and Twitter, and the Clinton campaign really didn't. So that would be point one. Point two, networks played a big part in the election, not only Trump's own network, which he'd built up over the years on TV, but also the network that interfered, the Russian network, which successfully penetrated both the Democratic Party and the Trump campaign. And then let's not forget the Islamic State network, which caused major terrorist incidents in the 12 months before the election, which I think had a big effect on the way that people responded to, say, Trump's Muslim ban, which polled very strongly during the election. And he was the only candidate to use that kind of language. So the election was very much shaped by networks, and it continues to be, because Trump has this direct relationship with his huge follower base on Twitter. This is a new kind of politics, which he got to before anybody else in American politics. He makes Obama, who seemed like the pioneer of this kind of politics, now look really like an amateur.
The new book is The Square and the Tower, Networks and Power from the Freemasons to Facebook. Niall Ferguson, thank you very much.